In 2013, when you came in, you had dismantled the DV unit and restructured it to the SVU unit.
The portion that does felonies, yes.
Correct.
The portion that does misdemeanors has stayed the same.
Okay, what is the benefit of generalizing domestic violence with SVU?
The benefit is that we've been able to get more experienced prosecutors involved in the cases, and to me that was the most important thing. The attorneys that do those cases are sort of the second level of attorney in terms of experience and in terms of the quality of their work. So I felt it was really important to get the best people we could involved in those cases with more experience, and I just think it's worked better.
Have you been able to, I want to say, evaluate whether the changes you've made have been effective?
Yes, looking sort of statistically, they appear to be at least the same, if not better, than it was before. I feel it's better because we've got more experienced people in there. You know, I monitor the trials they're doing and the success rate that they're having. So, you know, as far as I can tell, it's working as well, if not better, than it did before.
So, because with the DV, when it had the DV unit, I know that was solely just DV cases. Are you comfortable in assuming that since you've made that switch, that domestic violence cases are receiving the necessary attention now that they've been kind of lumped with other cases like child abuse, sex abuse, elderly abuse, all of those other, are they still getting that same attention?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that particular group is unique in that they meet together once a week to discuss cases, to roundtable cases. It's very intensive. And the person that's in charge of that section is Deb Barra, who's one of our best prosecutors overall. In fact, she was formerly one of our major case prosecutors who has such a passion for this area of the law that she asked to actually go back and do that kind of work. So yes, you know, and all I can look at really is the sort of the statistics of how cases are being handled, success rates, and thus far it appears to be working well.
When you say success rates, what are you basing that on?
That's more anecdotal, just sort of I look at the trials as they come through, you know, how many are they trying, how many are they winning, that kind of thing, and it appears to be pretty successful.
For those that are concerned that you have these cases that aren't getting the necessary attention because you have other big cases like a child abuse case, a sex abuse case, how would you say that how are you sure that they are getting that attention, that deserved attention, when before you had a sole unit dedicated just for these type of cases?
Well, honestly, I haven't had anybody tell me that. And if somebody has that observation, I'd love to speak to them about it, because obviously everything is subject to being corrected and made better. At this point, so far as I can tell, it seems to be working well. I haven't gotten that feedback from the community that they feel that these cases are being neglected. In fact, you know, there's a very close working relationship between my office and the DV community. We're constantly meeting. In fact, one of the things that we instituted recently was that our victim advocates are now meeting monthly to discuss common cases. So we have a very close relationship with them, and so far as I know, everything seems to be working well.
Back in 2013, you were part of a domestic violence on the task force developing that commission.
The Domestic Violence Commission.
Exactly.
Correct.
One of the recommendations was to have more more victims advocates.
Right.
Has this office added more victims advocates?
We actually have. I believe we added one victim advocate to DV in the last year. We are presently working with the legislature on a package of new personnel for both human trafficking and domestic violence. And one of the large parts of both of those is more victim advocates. So yeah, we do.
Could you restructure staff so that you'd be able to shift positions to have more victims advocates?
Well, as far as within the office, that's how we added the additional victim advocate. We basically took other positions that were in other areas and moved it to victim advocates. We're constantly looking for ways to do that. At this point, I really have not heard from anybody that we have an insufficient staff of victim advocates. Part of the DV Commission's recommendation had to do both with victim advocates at our level, the sheriff's level, and Harbor House level. And I know Harbor House has been a great partner with us in getting victim advocates involved with victims earlier, and we've been very supportive of that.
So just so I'm clear, so from the 2013 report had recommended that you add more victims advocate. One was added.
I believe we added one, yes, that we were able to sort of scrap something together to put it together. We haven't received any new personnel positions from the legislature in quite some time. So hopefully this year we'll actually be able to really bolster that.
Do you think one is enough?
I think one, no, I'd love to have 10, but unfortunately we have to go use what we have, and we were only able to add one, and I'm pretty proud that we were able to do that.
One of the other recommendations, I believe, was, and this kind of falls under victims advocates, I believe, was to ensure that victims are kept informed of the case status, court dates, no order contacts, conditions of probation. What system have you put in place to make sure that that does happen?
Well, that's the responsibility of the victim advocates, and we have a system in place where they will call and notify victims of any significant change in the status of the case, any significant hearings. They're called and notified and invited to participate and give their opinion.
So that's the victim's advocate's responsibility to make sure that's done?
That is the victim advocate's responsibility. Yeah. Now, the attorneys do it as well. Most of our attorneys like to be very hands-on with their victims because that's kind of the best way of ensuring their continued cooperation. But primarily, it's the victim advocate that's going to be responsible for the day-to-day updating of the victims.
So if that isn't happening, or if a victim has not been notified, where do you think I want to say the breakdown could have occurred?
It would depend on the case, and I would hope that any victim that doesn't feel they're getting sufficient notification would contact us and let us know, because we'll get on it right away. In fact, I get letters from victims in various areas at various times, and when I do, I always pass it along and make sure that we check it out to see if there is in fact a breakdown, and if there is, that we fix it.
So I guess my question is, what is the process then for contacting the victim? Is it solely the victim's advocate, or is it the attorney? How does that work?
Well, I believe both of them do. It depends on the issue. Okay. I would imagine that if the issue were a scheduling matter, just letting them know that there's a hearing on such and such a date, that I would assume most likely would be the victim advocate calling just to update them. Has there never been a time when a victim has complained? No, of course there is. And what we do is we look at our records, and in every occasion I'm aware of when we've looked at our records, we've discovered that in fact the notifications were made. But again, if any victim has a problem with it, please have them contact me and I'll be happy to look at it. And as I said, if the system needs to be fixed, it will be fixed.
In general, if a victim does try to contact the state attorney's office, what advice would you give to them if they're calling and not getting any return calls, or if they can't get through? What advice would you give someone to find out what's going on with their case if they feel like they can't get through?
If they're not getting an answer from either our victim advocates or our attorneys, what I ask them to do immediately is to contact our office, ask for the supervisor for our victim services group, which is Erin McCauley, or the supervisor of our domestic violence prosecutors, which is at the misdemeanor level is Mark Wickstrom, at the felony level is Deb Barra. Call one of those people and let us know if our system is breaking down and not working for them, and we will fix it. We will address it. Our requests to the legislature have been very specific in two areas: human trafficking and domestic violence. And we actually went through the process of getting a lot of community support behind our requests. So we didn't just say, hey, give us more people, we'd like to do this. We made specific plans and got the support of Harbor House and other people in DV and human trafficking. And we presented a proposal to the legislature. That proposal is presently funded in the Senate budget. It is not yet funded in the House budget. So we're very hopeful that we will actually be able to get some additional personnel to apply to both of these very, very important issues.
You have restructured your staff to restructured your staff, so you have added one since 2013.
We've added one victim advocate, I believe, and one attorney. To be clear, we've actually added two attorneys to domestic violence. One of them does a specific purpose in civil injunction hearings, and the other one is an additional prosecutor in our domestic violence misdemeanor division. Hearing
the sheer frustration from them and not being able to get through, or calling and not getting a returned phone call, that clearly, I'm sure, is not acceptable. And if that's the perception that these women have that are victims of domestic violence, that the state is turning their back on them, what would you say?
I would say that is untrue. We're not turning our back on victims of domestic violence. We spend a great deal of time and effort in those cases. But again, if there is a particular individual that doesn't feel they're getting contacted, I've given you the name of 3 people who are supervisors to contact, because if a victim is not getting the information that they're supposed to be getting, that is a concern to me. At this point, I'm not aware that as a system-wide problem that exists.